Welcome to the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and activate notifications to receive all new. The moment I felt like I was being watched, little did I know that that look would change my life forever. This is an event that happened to me back in 2013 when I was in 5th grade, living in New York City. It feels strange talking about it even after all these years. But I believe people need to hear this, especially parents who might trust their kids too easily with new acquaintances. I remember it was late September, one of those crisp autumn afternoons. School had just started a couple of weeks earlier, and everything seemed normal. My routine after school was always the same: hang out on the playground and play soccer until my mom called me home. On that particular day, I was chasing the ball, completely absorbed in the game, when suddenly my foot got caught, and I tumbled hard onto the ground. Before I could get up, someone reached out a hand. It was a boy I hadn't seen before. He smiled as he helped me up, introducing himself as Jack. He mentioned he just moved to our neighborhood, and this was his first week at our school. Jack seemed friendly, quiet but approachable, and we quickly became close. Over the next few days, we chatted more during recess, teamed up during games, and eventually formed a solid friendship. He lived just a few streets away, which made hanging out convenient. My parents briefly met Jack when they picked me up from school, and they felt reassured knowing I had a new friend nearby. About 2 weeks later, on a Saturday morning, my family and I decided to go hiking in Bear Mountain, north of the city. We rarely ran into anyone we knew there, but strangely, halfway through the hike, we bumped into Jack and his dad. At first, it seemed like a pleasant coincidence. Jack's dad introduced himself as Michael. He was tall, smiling, and had a calm, easygoing demeanor that immediately put my parents at ease. They chatted for a while, and at one point, Michael casually asked if they'd be comfortable letting me sleep over at their house sometime soon. My mom hesitated at first, but Michael reassured them, saying they'd keep an eye on us. Eventually, seeing how friendly and responsible Michael appeared, my parents agreed. So, about a week later, on a Friday evening, I went over to Jack's house for my first ever sleepover. The house looked normal, even cozy, but something about it felt slightly off. I quickly brushed off those thoughts, blaming it on nerves since this was my first time staying at a friend's place. At first, everything went smoothly. We played video games, ate pizza for dinner, and talked about soccer. Around 10 p.m., Jack's dad came in and gently reminded us to head to bed soon. We settled into Jack's room upstairs and eventually drifted off to sleep. Sometime later, I woke up suddenly. I wasn't sure what startled me, but then I heard voices from downstairs, multiple voices, muffled and urgent. I nudged Jack awake and whispered to him about the noises. Jack just shrugged, half asleep, and said his parents probably had guests over. Then, his dad's voice called out sharply, ordering Jack to come downstairs immediately. Jack looked mildly annoyed but went anyway, leaving me alone in the dimly lit room. Feeling uneasy, I quietly got up and locked the bedroom door, just to be safe. A few minutes passed, and the voices downstairs grew louder and angrier. Heavy footsteps echoed on the wooden stairs, heading toward Jack's bedroom. I froze, heart pounding, as someone stopped right outside the door. Then came a knock harder than usual, almost aggressive. Jack's voice calmly asked me to unlock the door, assuring me everything was fine. But there was something unsettling about how calm he sounded amidst the chaos downstairs. I stayed silent, pretending to still be asleep. Then another voice, deeper and harsher, shouted through the door, demanding I open it immediately. My heart raced, panic setting in. I grabbed my phone and sent my parents a rushed, fragmented text. "I'm scared, lock doors, come quick." Before I could finish typing more clearly, loud pounding began on the door, violent and forceful this time, shaking the entire room. I scrambled into the closet, trembling uncontrollably, hiding under piles of clothes and breathing as quietly as possible. Seconds later, I heard wood splintering, the door breaking apart. Heavy footsteps stormed into the room. A flashlight beam swept across the closet door, and suddenly it flung open. A large man I'd never seen before reached in and yanked me out roughly. I kicked and struggled, but he easily dragged me downstairs. My eyes widened in shock when I saw a black van waiting outside, engine running. Jack stood silently beside his dad, not looking at me at all. My mind raced. I realized what was happening. They were kidnapping me. But then I saw headlights pulling into the driveway, my dad's familiar sedan. Relief washed over me, but it was quickly replaced by terror when the man holding me pulled out a handgun, pressing it against my side. My dad jumped out, holding his own gun, shouting at them to let me go. The man holding me warned my dad to drop his weapon or he'd teach me a lesson. In that horrifying moment, by sheer luck, a patrol car drove by. The officers immediately noticed something was wrong. They shouted commands, drew their weapons, and tackled the two men swiftly, arresting them on the spot. Jack's dad was cuffed and thrown into the back seat, protesting loudly as they took him away. The days following that nightmare were a blur. Police officers regularly visited our home, updating my parents about the ongoing investigation. Weeks later, the detective in charge finally sat us down and revealed the chilling truth. Jack's father, Michael, had intended to sell me to that man for $10,000. It turned out he had fled another city, Boston, if I remember correctly, after committing similar crimes. The police had been searching for him for months. Jack never returned to our school, and I never heard from him or his family again. My parents were deeply shaken. They blamed themselves for trusting someone they barely knew. I guess you never truly know people as well as you think. The scariest part, though, was what the detective said. Jack had assisted his father in previous incidents. He wasn't some innocent kid caught in his dad's nightmare, he had been part of it all along. That realization still haunts me the most. I am an only child, raised by two parents, and we live in Texas. For privacy reasons, I'll refer to them as Franklin and Samantha, and I'll call myself Walter. Last week marked my 18th birthday, which fell on a weekend when I didn't have college. I woke up that morning, brewed some coffee, and prepared breakfast. I didn't bother buying or baking a birthday cake because I was confident my roommates and friends would surprise me with a party. I decided to check my phone to see if anyone had sent birthday wishes. When I opened it, I noticed my parents had sent their greetings. Alongside the messages, my mom shared 3 files via our iMessage group chat, files containing old videotapes of me and my parents. They wanted to remind me of cherished memories since I was now officially an adult. Beneath the files they wrote, "Congratulations." I clicked on the first video, which showed my 3rd birthday party. The celebration took place at our house, filled with childhood friends and extended family. The video ended with me blowing out the candles on the cake. Next, I opened the second tape. It featured me riding a bicycle for the first time at age 9. I looked so happy riding that bike it became my daily companion for trips to school and back. Then I clicked on the 3rd and final video. The footage began with a man, a woman, and their child enjoying a barbecue in their backyard while singing joyfully. The person behind the camera moved slowly, crouching low as if trying not to be seen. For 5 minutes, nothing unusual happened until I heard a woman speaking off camera. Her voice grew louder as she approached the cameraman. She asked, "Did you get them, Frank?" "Oh yeah, I did, honey," Frank replied. I paused the video, overcome by a chilling realization. Could these voices truly belong to my parents? Hoping I was mistaken, I resumed watching. Frank then turned the camera toward what appeared to be his wife, and it was indeed my mom, Samantha. My suspicions were confirmed. She looked about 15 to 20 years younger in the video. With a sinister and devilish grin, she asked, "Are you ready?" "Of course I am," my dad responded. They both walked around the fence toward the garden. As they approached, my mom pulled something shiny from her pocket, though I couldn't quite make it out. They crept closer to the unsuspecting couple. Suddenly, the woman turned her head toward them. Before she could react further, she collapsed lifelessly to the ground like a discarded doll. The man quickly spun around, his face initially calm but turning pale with terror within seconds. He fled the property, disappearing from sight. I sat frozen, my hands covering my mouth, as I continued watching. My dad then approached the unconscious, or rather, dead woman and took her baby from her arms. The infant began crying, calling out for its mother. My mom shoved a tissue into the baby's mouth, ordering it to shut up. They left the scene and returned to a house I believe was their previous residence before moving to our current home. My mom approached my dad and said, "Let's prepare the papers." Her next words pierced through me like ice. She added, "I think we should name him Walter. I like that name, and I'm sure he'll be great." My dad replied. The video abruptly cut off. After downloading the file, I remained paralyzed for the next 10 minutes, struggling to process what I had just witnessed. I reopened my phone and checked the group chat. To my shock, the third video file had vanished. My mom then sent a message. "Did you see the third video?" I lied, replying, "No, I didn't." She responded, "Good, because I sent that one by accident." I replied with a thumbs up emoji, ending the conversation there. It's now April, and I'm nearing the end of my first year of college. Once I finish, I plan to relocate somewhere far across the country, away from my so-called home. When I settle into this new location, which is yet to be determined, I intend to anonymously report my parents to the authorities. I hope they are locked away for a long time for crimes such as kidnapping, abduction, false imprisonment, and possibly murder. My entire life has been built on lies, and the weight of it makes me want to end everything. But I will stay strong. Once my parents are out of my life, I plan to share my story with the world. Until then, I will remain anonymous and keep you updated if anything changes. Being a single mother is no easy task. Between raising my 3-year-old daughter, Jessica, and working night shifts at a diner, I was perpetually exhausted. Small details often slipped my mind, like leaving the milk out, forgetting to lock the back door, or misplacing my keys. It was easy to attribute these lapses to sheer fatigue. We lived in a modest 2-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood known as Hawthorne Heights. Our home was cozy but aging, with creaking floors and doors that never seemed to close properly. Despite its quirks, it felt safe. Neighbors looked out for one another, and I had lived there since Jessica was born. But in early October, things began to feel unsettling. It started with minor incidents. One evening after work, around 11 p.m., I noticed the chair slightly pulled away from the kitchen table. I could have sworn I'd pushed it back before leaving, but I dismissed it. Another time, the TV remote vanished for hours, only to reappear later on the bathroom sink. At first, I blamed Jessica. She was curious and playful, but she was also tiny, barely tall enough to reach that counter. I dismissed these oddities as insignificant. After all, juggling motherhood, work, and household chores leaves little room for mental clarity. Then Jessica began acting strangely. One evening, as I tucked her into bed, she whispered something that sent chills down my spine. "Mommy, the man in the closet scares me." My heart skipped a beat, but I quickly convinced myself it was just her vivid toddler imagination. I smiled gently, opened the closet door, and showed her there was no one inside. She nodded sleepily, reassured, and drifted off. But her words lingered in my mind. Over the next few days, an uneasy tension settled over our home. Jessica became more withdrawn, clinging to me constantly. Once or twice, she glanced nervously at the closet, her eyes wide with fear. Again, I checked inside, finding nothing but clothes and toys scattered about. I chalked it up to typical childhood fears. Then things took a darker turn. One morning, I discovered muddy footprints near the back door, footprints far too large to belong to Jessica's tiny shoes. My breath quickened, but exhaustion once again provided a convenient excuse. Maybe I tracked mud in from outside. I cleaned the floor thoroughly, though a gnawing unease remained. Everything changed on October 25th. It was a quiet Thursday night. Around 9 p.m. work had been unusually slow, and my manager let me leave early, a rare relief. I planned to surprise Jessica and my sister, who babysat while I worked. As I drove home through the familiar tree-lined streets, something felt off. The neighborhood was darker than usual, clouds obscuring the moon and casting an eerie shadow over everything. Pulling into my driveway, I immediately noticed my sister's car wasn't there. Confused, I parked quickly, my heart beginning to race. She never left Jessica alone, never. I cautiously opened the front door, softly calling her name. No response. Instead, I heard faint rustling upstairs. Jessica must have been awake. Relieved but puzzled, I headed upstairs quietly, my footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. Jessica's room was open, and to my horror, I found her sitting up in bed, wide awake, staring blankly at the closet door. Her eyes met mine briefly before returning to the door, fear etched across her face. A chill ran through me. I followed her gaze. The closet door was slightly ajar, moving slowly back and forth as if nudged by an invisible force. Something inside me screamed to get Jessica out. Without hesitation, I scooped her into my arms, holding her tightly as I backed out of the room. Just then, a faint, almost imperceptible creak echoed above me from the attic. My heart stopped. In 3 years of living there, I'd nearly forgotten we even had an attic, a cramped, dusty space I'd only opened once when we moved in. Now, hearing that noise, everything felt sickeningly wrong. I rushed downstairs, clutching Jessica tightly, and dialed 911 with trembling fingers. Within minutes, flashing blue lights illuminated my street. 2 officers arrived swiftly, calming me enough to explain what I'd heard and seen. While one officer stayed with me and Jessica in the living room, the other went upstairs, weapon drawn. I sat motionless, straining to hear as heavy footsteps moved cautiously through the house. Suddenly, the officer upstairs shouted, "Urgent and sharp!" Seconds later, a loud thudding erupted, someone sprinting above us, followed by muffled yells and a scuffle. My stomach churned as the officer beside me bolted upstairs to assist his partner. I held Jessica tightly, covering her ears, terrified of what might happen next. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, the officers reappeared downstairs, their expressions serious and tense. They had apprehended someone hiding in the attic, a disheveled, thin man I vaguely recognized from around town. Apparently, he had been sneaking into our attic through a loose vent at the back of the house, living unnoticed for weeks. My mind raced as I realized all those moments I'd dismissed weren't due to my imagination or exhaustion. They were evidence that someone had been quietly invading our home. He had studied our routines, learned when we'd be asleep or away, and silently occupied our private space. The next day, the police showed me photographs from the attic. Blankets, food wrappers, old clothes, and bottles filled the cramped area. The most disturbing detail was a small hole he had drilled directly above Jessica's closet, giving him a clear view into her room. The man in the closet wasn't imaginary, he had been watching her every night. We moved out within days. Staying in that house felt impossible. The thought of someone secretly observing us was unbearable. Months passed, and life slowly regained some semblance of normalcy. But years later, living miles away in a safe, brightly lit apartment, Jessica still occasionally whispers about the man in the closet. And every single night, I triple-check the locks, unable to shake the chilling realization that someone could have been so close, watching, waiting, and listening for weeks without me ever knowing.